Hi everyone. In this video we're going to go over some tips and tricks in Rhino for making meshes that you can apply materials to. We'll also go over some of the cool new features in Rhino 8, particularly shrink wrap, and we'll make sure that you really understand geometry types in Rhino and the 3 different types that you have available for making models. Okay. So I want to get into the shrink wrap, but I first want to show you just the 3 different geometry types in Rhino. This is really important. By default, most modeling happens in Rhino using NURBS models. That's what we have in the standard toolbar. And so if we make a box, for example, we're making a mesh box. I'm sorry, a NURBS box. If we're making a sphere, we're making a NURBS sphere. But there are other ways to make geometries, like for example, I could type mesh sphere. And this is a great new geometry type. It's best understood maybe as a super mesh. If I hit the tab key, it's faceted like a mesh, but if I hit the tab key again, it's smooth like a NURBS. And this is really great. So typically you wouldn't use, I wouldn't use meshes or modeled by default with meshes, because we can always use Subdivision geometry and convert it to a mesh when we need. So for example, I can use the command Extract Control Polygon, and I get exactly this geometry as a mesh. The difference is when I hit tab, it doesn't smooth out. And so the nice thing about this also, I should point out that I could mesh this NURB. Objects, mesh to NURB, I'm sorry. I could mesh, and get a mesh object from this NURBS object, and that's something that can be useful at times too. Okay, but let's focus on this Subdivision geometry because this is really great. We can also very easily convert it back into a NURBS surface if we need to. So just be aware that we have these 3 types of objects. We have meshes, we have NURBS, and then we have subdies. And subdies we can hit the tab command to show them either smooth or faceted. All right, so here's a collection of NURBS spheres that I've kind of aggregated around, and I'm going to use the subd command to turn them. I'm sorry, this shrink wrap command, which is new in Rhino 8, to make a new mesh around this. This can be really useful for 3D printing, or if you just want to experiment with form. Okay, so if I should point out before I do this that because I'm taking this into, I don't know, maybe eventually this mesh will make it into Maya, which is a default unit of centimeter. I have my units set to centimeters here. So when I use the shrink wrap command, I will have this target edge length, and this is what's going to control the resolution of my object. So if I hit OK here and look at the default, I can see this thing. Oops, I did not want to do that. I actually wanted to shrink wrap, preview this, because that way we can actually see our objects, we can hide our input objects, and now we get a preview of this. And you know, the difference here with the original one is that we're getting some smooth transitions, which is kind of nice. If you don't want those, then what you need to do is lower the resolution of the mesh, take this down to something like 0.01 and preview that, and then you can see that like you're getting a really tight seam around here. That's pretty intense. So maybe we want 0.1, or we could have 0.05, something like that, and it gets less heavy, but we're getting a sharper seam there. So that's just something that you can experiment with, kind of edging it down, let's say, to see what works. I think for our purposes, it's nice to have a bit of a transition. And then also on the other end of the scale, if we make this target edge length really, really high, we can actually start to get kind of weird faceted things. So it can be interesting if that's what you want. So let's take it down to maybe somewhere in between like 0.5 or 0.3. And now we're getting kind of some nice transitions here, but we're still seeing, you know, the suggestion between that these are separate objects which are kind of merging together. And I want to use this, so I'm going to hit OK. Now I have from my collection of NURBS spheres a new solid closed mesh object. And again, I cannot hit tab and get a sub-D surface from this because it's a mesh. What I can do, however, now this would not be so great for texturing because or even making a sub-D, because we have lots of irregular polygons. And if we want this to be a sub-D or also for texturing, it can be helpful to have a more uniform mesh. So since Rhino 7, there's been a really great command called Quad Remesh. And let's just look at the default here, target quad count of 2000. We also have the option to turn this not into a mesh, but into or convert it from a mesh to a sub-D. So let's leave this checked, or check it if it's not checked. We can hit our preview and again hide the input objects. And now you can see that we have from that very irregular mesh, a nice and tidy quad mesh. We can make this higher resolution if we want, going to up to say not 1000, but 10,000. Make this super high res. And then on the other end of the scale, we can also use target edge length if we prefer. This is the quad count method is pretty nice though, because you're kind of controlling, or you are controlling the number of polygons that you get in the end. So 20, it still holds up pretty well, but or 200, once we go down to 20, something like this, then it starts to get pretty weird. So, and then if we didn't have sub-D on, you're going to see the meshes. If we took it down to something really low, like 10, we'll get something faceted, I would imagine. And it's taking quite a long time for this to, oh, there we go. Right, so now we get that. All right, not looking much like our original thing, so let's take this back to 2000. That's kind of a good default. Convert to sub-D, hit OK. Now let's move this over. So we have this mesh, now we have this sub-D, and we know it's a sub-D because this, we're told that it's a sub-D in the properties, but we can also hit tab, and the tab switches between faceted and smooth. Okay, the nice thing about sub-Ds also is that we can convert this to we can convert this back to a NURBS model very easily. And so Booleans don't work so well with sub-Ds, but we can very easily convert between convert objects to NURBS. So we can convert this back to a NURBS object. Oops, I want to pull the other one. Let's grab the poly surface. That's our NURBS. So we get these NURBS patches, and now we could use all of the nice NURBS commands on this, including Boolean. So it would be very difficult for me to, let's say, take this sphere, NURBS, sub-D, or otherwise, and Boolean it out of this sub-D object. But what I can do is I could come over to this. I can use my Boolean command, Boolean difference. Take this one, oops, this one, enter this one, and now I've carved that out. And then if I want to turn it back into a sub-D, I just need to use the Quad Remesh command again and hit OK, preview it, see if it looks okay, hide the input objects, and this is looking pretty good. So I hit OK, move that over. Now I have my sub-D object. Okay, so let me hide these guys. And let's say I want to bring this into Substance Painter to apply a material that we've made. Let's add some more resolution to this. We also need to make it a mesh. It can't be a sub-D by default, so we have to convert this back to a mesh. But before we do, maybe I'll just make a copy of this sub-D over here if I want to save it. But I'm going to come back to Solid Tools, Sub-D Tools, and use the Subdivide Sub-D command. And this is going to give me more resolution. Even that, I think, is going to be good just for displacement purposes. So this is pretty dense, but not crazy. And now I want to use my command, Extract Control Polygon. And that will give me the exact mesh. So you see I have the closed mesh, and then somewhere I also have the sub-D under there. So let me hide that mesh. I have the sub-D. Actually, I don't want to hide it because I have some other things under there. So yeah, okay, I can just select the sub D and I delete that, and now I have my mesh. And this is what we're going to want to take into, let's say, Maya or Substance Painter for texturing, if we're coming from Rhino. The other thing I want to show you is how you could have multiple materials in an object for Painter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another sub D sphere here. And let's do it kind of like that. Okay. And let's say we're going to nestle this sphere into that, where we boolean the other one out. So I'm going to make that a little smaller. That looks pretty good. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. And so I want to export this as part of the scene that we're going to add materials to. What I need to do is convert this to a mesh because it's still sub D. So let's go ahead and add some more divisions to this, so it's kind of approximately the same level of. Let's extract the control polygon. Okay, great. Let's get rid of the sub D. So now we have this mesh and we have this mesh. Now, right now these two have the same material, and so even though they're separate meshes, if we export them to Substance Painter, they are going to have different material, or they're going to have the same material. So Substance Painter doesn't allow you to apply materials by mesh object, but instead by materials. So what we need to do here is we need to make some materials. And I have some here I had before. Let me just delete these. Delete this one. Yeah, and let's make these again. So let's see, by default, we're here in the materials tab. Let's just make 2 materials, and we will call the first one, we'll make a custom material. We'll give it the name Mat 01 for material 01. The color, let's give it a greenish color. And then we will make another material. So custom, make sure we're on that one. Call this Mat 02. And this color, we're going to give it like a gray color. So now we can keep these things apart, or tell them apart. Okay, so my mass, or the body of this thing, we're going to make this material 1. So select that, assign to objects. Oops. Assign to objects. And let's look at our rendered material, and now we can see that it is indeed assigned to that. This one, select material 2, assign to objects. Now we have this gray material. Okay, so now when we export this to Substance Painter as an OBJ, we will be able to apply different materials to these 2 different objects. All right, so let's go ahead and go to File, Export Selected, and we want to use find the OBJ file type, and call this Painter Test. I already have a Painter Test, so I'll call this Painter Test 2. In the options for the OBJs, let's use Polygon Mesh for sure, and then formatting, make sure that you have Map Rhino Z to OBJY. And programs like Painter, Maya, they tend to use Y as up. So, so it's nice that we can convert from Z to Y as far as our up axis, and everything will look like we expect it to look. Shouldn't, unless you have problems, have to go in and change any of these other settings. And if this is not clicked by default, this is the one you need to make sure that is you have it clicked, and of course you want this to be a mesh object. So here we hit OK, and so these 2 different meshes will be in that one OBJ. They'll have different materials assigned, and then Substance Painter will be able to read those objects. Okay, so I hope you've learned something about geometry, about meshes, preparing meshes, have a better understanding of the shrink wrap tool, and in future videos we'll look at, how we can use this geometry in Painter. Thanks, and have fun.